Hey guys, so welcome back. Today I would like to show you guys a game I had against Emperor's Children with my Blood Angels army in November of 2025. And if you guys have any thoughts about the deployment I had here or the strategy I used in game, do feel free to ask me in the comment section below. All right, let's get started. So, the point of this game was to test a budget beginner 1,000-point Blood Angels list that I was building. So let's take a look and do a brief breakdown of the unit. So we had two 3-man Sanguinary Guard squads, each led by a jump captain. We had a 10-man Assault Intercessor kind of Death Star unit led by the Foot Captain, who would be inside of a Land Raider. We had the Land Raider itself, and we had two 5-man Scout squads. And there were a couple ideas behind this list. One was to have all that really, really good melee killing power we have in this list complemented by a bit of solid shooting as well. So the Land Raider is a solid shooting platform, especially when you combine it with Oath of Moment. And then on top of that, all our other kind of hammer units are really good at cleaving through enemies in melee. We have the Captain, who obviously has his finest hour where he's popping devastating wounds. He's getting wound rerolls on objectives because of those assault intercessors, very, very lethal. And we have the two sanguinary squads who are led by a jump captain each, so they're strength 9 on the charge. They're doing AP3 damage to attacks and melee, and they're -1 to hit, -1 to wound. So solid in combat. And the other idea behind this list was kind of to mitigate the comparably low survivability of toughness 4 2-wound Space Marines with a lot of 2-up saves. So the Land Raider has a 2-up save, the two Sanguinary Guards have a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln, and obviously the Foot Captain with our Assault Intercessors don't have a 2-up save, but they're on the Land Raider. So that's kind of mitigated. And obviously our Scouts should be behind cover doing us actions. Another idea behind this list is that you kind of have a good point segmentation. So all our 4 kind of hammer units, kind of killy units, the Land Raider, the 2 Sanguinary Guard squads, and the Assault Intercessor blob are all around 200 points. Maybe 220, maybe 230 points, but they're all around 200 points, which means if we lose one of them, the game isn't over, right? It's better than having a 300-point kind of Death Star. You lose it and you just think, what am I going to do now? So kind of good for beginners. If you lose one of them, it's not over. And then finally, the other idea behind this list is that in this case, we have kind of a good CP economy. I frequently find that as a Blood Angels player, I'm constantly behind my enemies who are able to generate command points somehow. So having all these kind of captains in the army popping their rights of battle doesn't really solve that problem, but it does mitigate it a bit. It makes interrupts a bit easier. You get a pop red rampage every round if you have to. So just 1 free CP each round. So this was the first time I'd run this list against a solid melee list. In fact, a really, really good melee army. I'd played it against some shooting armies, I'd won, but this was the first time I was running it against Emperor's Children. Let's have a quick look at the list I was running against. I was running my list against a Demon Prince of Slaaneshi with -1 damage, and this guy can also do flat 3 damage with his melee weapons, which is very, very dangerous for my Sanguinary Guard. They all have 3 wounds, and since he's -1 damage, it also means that the weapons my Sanguinary Guard have, since they all have damage to weapons, are really nerfed when they're in combat with him. On top of that, he had 2 Lord Exultants, each leading an Infractor blob, and crucially, all their weapons have precision and lethals, which is very, very bad for a list that depends heavily on captains to make my Sanguinary Guard work. My Sanguinary Guard are -1 to hit and -1 to wound in melee, but only if they're led by a captain. So every time he fights me, my captain is going to die first. And once my captain is dead, I'm not -1 to hit and -1 to wound in melee anymore. So very, very strong, and he also has an ability for his Lord Exultant to make his weapons +1 AP. On top of that, they have reroll wounds on objectives, so those infractors are basically going to be ignoring my -1 in melee because they're just going to be rerolling wounds. In addition to that, he had Lucius the Eternal, who obviously has fights first, lone operative, and he's reruling hit and wounds in melee against character units. So also very, very powerful. And he had 2 Tormentor squads, 5-man Tormentor squads. All of them again have precision. And on top of that, just kind of looking at all the kind of things he can do with his detachment, his army. He has a lot of lethals in his army, especially those infractors, and he can give himself lethals or sustained. So he can stack lethals with sustained, and he can pop Fight on Death for 2 CP, which is extremely powerful against Blood Angels. On top of that, he has an ability, Stratagem, to pop +1 AP, making my Armor of Contempt redundant. So he's nerfing a lot of my abilities with all his different kind of shenanigans. Plus, if one of his tormentors or infractors kill a unit, they get a CP. So it's not like the Rites of Battle of the Captain, where it's kind of -1 CP or whatever. They straight up just get a CP if they kill one of my units. So this guy is going to, if I don't watch out, be swimming in CP and popping Fight on Death quite frequently. On top of that, Emperor's Children, Peerless Blades, has advance and charge army-wide. Now, Blood Angels can do it once per round for a command point, but Emperor's Children, advance and charge army-wide, on the one hand, I do have 12-inch movement with my jump pack units and my Land Raider and what have you, but on the other, his units have 7 inches, and his Demon Prince has 14 inches, and Lucius has something like 8. And being able to advance and charge every single round for no CP, that's a big mitigation factor that's definitely counters my kind of movement advantage. So very, very tricky and difficult list to go against. But without further ado, let's get started. So we were playing Take and Hold. Very, very classic, very straightforward. 5 victory points for each objective that we held, including our home objective, to a maximum of 15 victory points per round. We were not playing any twists or challengers, and this was what the deployment looked like. So let's have a look at the deployment of the Emperor's Children. He had Lucius with 2 Tormentor squads on the left flank, so that the Tormentor squads are sort of those sticky intercessor type units. In the center, he had an Infractor squad led by a Lord Exultant, and on the right flank, he had an Infractor Death Star led by a Lord Exultant and a Winged Demon Prince of Slaaneshi. So my wish list for the first battle round really was to take out Lucius and Demon Prince. Those were the 2 units that were really taking my attention. Lucius, obviously, because he has fights first, I'm not going to be able to kill him with anything other than maybe my Land Raider by shooting him. I can't really tank his melee because he's got reroll hits, reroll wounds. How am I going to tank that? He's got +1 AP for a stratagem. So Lucius was taking up a lot of my attention. And the other thing was the Demon Prince. I've played against Demon Princes a lot. They do tend to frequently tank a lot of wounds and cause a lot of problems, which maybe counterintuitively made me want to focus a lot of fire on them quite early on and take them out early on. So focus of my attention, Lucius and the Demon Prince, and the 2 kind of infractor blobs. I kind of thought, with 7-inch move, they're kind of slow in quotation marks compared to my 12-inch move Land Raider and Sanguinary Guard squads. So, I could worry about them maybe a bit later. Focus was Lucius and the Demon Prince. All right, so let's have a look at Blood Angels deployment. I had my 2 Sanguinary Guard squads in the L-shaped ruins that my deployment zone had provided me with. The Sanguinary Guard squad on my right flank was just about in charge range of Lucius if he rolled very well, so I did place them 1 inch away from the wall. Aside from that, I also had my 2 5-man scout squads. One scout squad was on my home objective, and the other scout squad was they weren't quite on the objective, but they did infiltrate and were in range to maybe do something if they got a relevant secondary. And obviously, they're also screening my Land Raider from a turn 1 charge from that Infractor Death Star in the middle. And I was pretty happy with this deployment. The only thing that I wasn't sure about was my Land Raider. Now, I was considering committing my Land Raider to the leftmost flank. The reason being that I actually had a shot. If I would have put my Land Raider on the left flank, I did have a shot on his Tormentor blob on the left, and I would have been able to move the Land Raider up to that left-hand objective, kind of sit it there, and it would have also been able to kind of shoot out the whole game. It wouldn't have had the best angles everywhere, but it could have sat on the objective, and it could have gotten a turn 1 shot if I'd gone first. But of course, you never know if you go first, and I did opt for the more conservative option in the end to stick him in the middle and just give myself options if I want to go left or right. So, first go went to Emperor's Children. He did pull a tempting target, and I gave him the middle objective to contest, and he wisely didn't do that. So, as you can see, he sent Lucius up to contest the left objective, and his rightmost Infractor blob to contest the rightmost objective, together with the Demon Prince in kind of heroic intervention range. So he wasn't able to score a tempting target, but he did decisively score Secure No Man's Land, and that was Emperor's Children, turn 1. So, Blood Angels, turn 1. I pulled Area Denial, which was a pretty easy win for me since there were no enemy units contesting the center objective, so I could max that out for its 6-inch maximum points of 5. And I also had Assassination, which meant kill characters. So to score Assassinate, I basically saw 3 options for myself. Option 1, and I'm going to pull out the laser pointer here to kind of show what I mean. So option 1 was to push the left flank with my Land Raider and get a shot on Lucius. Now I measured this out. I would have needed an advance and shoot for a CP to get a shot on Lucius, and I would have needed like a 6-inch or a 5-inch advance. So it was kind of unlikely. It wasn't guaranteed to even get a shot on Lucius over here. I definitely didn't want to charge him with my Sanguinary Guard squad since he's got fight first. Didn't want to lose him like that. So option 1 was out of the question for me, basically, because it was too risky. Now, option 2 was to move my Land Raider up the right flank, disembark my Assault Intercessors over here, and then go for a 6-inch charge into his Tormentor squad. Now, the 6-inch charge wouldn't have been too much of an issue because obviously I had a free CP with my Foot Captain, and I had another 1 or 2 CP, for anything else, for any defensive strats I'd need later. However, the thing here is that even though I would be fighting him on this objective, which means I would be rerolling wounds, I would absolutely cleave through this squad with my finest hour. He had about 3 CP since he'd thrown away one of his secondaries, which meant he would not only be able to fight on death and take out at least most of my squad. If I tried to mitigate that with Armor of Contempt, he would have another CP to add +1 AP to his weapons. So he would just go through my Armor of Contempt, or he could easily also heroically intervene with his Demon Prince over here, which basically means that, after this engagement, I would be lucky if I had the captain left. So I did not elect to go for option 2 and lose my Death Star of Assault Intercessors with the captain so early. I went with option 3. Now, what was option 3? Option 3, in my eyes, was to move my Land Raider over here with his 12 inches. And with those 12 inches, he wouldn't have a shot on the Tormentors or the Demon Prince. So I had to advance my Land Raider about 2 inches right around over here so that he could get a shot. And then I would focus fire everything into the Demon Prince with Oath of Moment and try to take him out and score Assassination that way. Now, it should be mentioned that there obviously is also an option 4, which was, I don't know, to just move all my units back and do nothing. But Like I said, his army is very, very fast, and if I would just kind of sit around for another round and let him move further, he would be in my army for sure. So this is what I did. So, as you can see, I did elect to move my Land Raider to the leftmost flank and try and take out the Demon Prince. Now, I stupidly did kind of forget that he had that -1 damage thing going for him, which was not ideal. Sometimes, I mean, with the Godhammer las cannons and with the Hunter Killer missiles, that doesn't have to be the end of the world. They can do 6 damage, but in my case, they did not do that much damage. Um, I did about 3 damage on the Demon Prince. I did not score assassination, and he was left on 7 wounds for the next round. The other thing I did, I'm going to take out my laser pointer here just to show you guys. I moved my Sanguinary Guard squad that was over here to the leftmost flank, and that meant that they couldn't get charged by Lucius in the next turn, and they couldn't get charged by this Infractor Death Star over here in the middle either. So I placed them right over here just to kind of keep them safe and kind of get my counterpunch ready for the next turn. So, Emperor's Children turn 2. The Emperor's Children pulled Marked for Death. I gave them the 2 Sanguinary Guard squads, which were not in chargeable range, plus the Scout squad on my home objective, which was also not chargeable. And my opponent did elect to take my Land Raider as his Gamma target. They also pulled Airy Denial, which meant he had to kill the scouts in the middle and take the center objective, which Lucius was very keen to do, as you can see in the picture up in the right-hand corner. And I have to say, I have played this list only in 2 other games, against Firestorm and against Custodes, and every time when I popped either Armor of Contempt or Smoke on my Land Raider, or a combination of both, my Land Raider was really able to tank a lot of wounds that were allocated to it. However, not so much in this game. So the Demon Prince went into it. He did a lot of wounds. The Infractor Death Star, the Infractors didn't even get a chance to fight, actually. The Lord Exultant one-shotted the Land Raider into oblivion, and he did score his Gamma objective with that. Again, I did pop Armor of Contempt, but he has that +1 AP stratagem, very, very powerful, so he basically mitigated that. And going into the end of round 2, he consolidated his Infractors back onto the leftmost objective. My Assault Intercessors moved out of the Land Raider. I don't think I lost any of them. So he did score Marked for Death for 2 and Area Denial for 5. At the end of the round, I was down a Land Raider and a Scout Squad, but I had a pretty strong counterpunch with those. Let me just show you guys with the laser pointer. 1 Sanguinary Guard squad right here, another here, and the Intercessor blob over here, ready to take some names. So, Blood Angels turn 2. I still had Assassination from the last round, which was a big yarp for me. I could definitely get that accomplished, and behind enemy lines to get into his deployment zone was a bit more difficult. Now, at this point, I do have to say a big mistake I made was to let my Land Raider die so early on in the game, because my Land Raider was my one kind of ace up the sleeve against this fight on death army. From now on, I would have to basically go into combat with all his units. I would try, but I couldn't really grenade my way out of it. I would have to go into melee with all these fight on death units. And I would obviously lose a lot of my killing power in doing so. So I did elect to send my 1 Sanguinary Guard squad over here into Lucius, and I sent this Sanguinary Guard squad behind the wall here into the Demon Prince, and I sent my Assault Intercessors over onto the Infractor objective to get those reroll wounds to finish them off. So as you can see, one positive result of sending my Sanguinary Guard over here is that they actually killed Lucius in shooting. A lot of people say that melta pistols aren't that good and kind of plasma pistol shooting doesn't do anything. In my case, I killed Lucius with an overcharged plasma pistol over here and one of my melta pistols from the Sanguinary Guard. So this squad didn't even need to fight Lucius, which is very positive. Over here, my Sanguinary Guard squad also shot into the Demon Prince, and they also threw a grenade, which meant the Demon Prince was only on 1 wound. So between the grenade and the Melta and the plasma shooting, I took 5 wounds off of this Demon Prince over here, when my Land Raider was only able to take 3 wounds off of him. And finally, my Assault Intercessor squad fought in the middle here. They did get their reroll wounds and everything, and they absolutely decimated this squad. The squad did pop Fight on Death, and I believe I countered with Armor of Contempt. I'm not entirely sure if he had enough CP at that point to also do his +1 AP against me, but at the end of it, I had a captain left and 1 Assault Intercessor over here, which was actually more than I was expecting. I frequently have the experience with Blood Angels that I can cleave through like a third of my opponent's army in any phase, but if I'm just kind of standing in the open after that, I really can't survive the clapback. So after having scored 5 victory points in Assassination and none for Area Denial, the question was really, could my Sanguinary Guard squad here in the middle survive the clapback? So, Emperor's Children turn 3. My opponent scored overwhelming force, which meant he had to kill units on objectives, which is very doable with my Sanguinary Guard just kind of sitting on the center objective there, and he had cleanse. And he also did score 10 for primary, which meant, again, he was kind of running away with primary at this point. And my opponent wisely didn't split his forces, but focused everything on the Sanguinary Guard in the middle and absolutely wiped them off the face of the earth. I'm not even sure if he made it into combat with them. He just shot everything into them with his melta-guns and what have you. I think they probably crumbled to his shooting. I don't think they even got it into melee. But end of turn 3, he did score 5 for both his primary, and my Sanguinary Guard squad in the middle was no more. So, turn 3 for Blood Angels. I did pull no prisoners, which meant I had to kill units, which I was very capable of doing, and sabotage, which meant I had to do an action in a building. So just to recap real quick, at this point, I only have this scout squad left here sitting on my home objective. I've still got this full squad of Sanguinary Guard over here, and I have this captain with the Assault Intercessor over here. He has his Tormentor or his Infractor Death Star here in the middle, but he also has the 2 Tormentor squads, which, amazingly, they've stickied their objectives. So they're contributing to the battle, whereas I'm kind of at the point where I have to decide, am I going to let these units kind of sit on objectives, because he's kind of running away with primary, or am I going to involve them in the battle? So option 1 was essentially to send my captain and the Assault Intercessor over here into the Infractors together with my Sanguinary Guard squad, and kind of, take them out, hope something survives. And option 2 was to put my captain in this building here, do an action, collect primary in the next round, and score 5 for sabotage, and just take my Sanguinary Guard squad into the middle, into that Infractor blob. Now, I did elect to send my Sanguinary Guard into the Infractors and leave my captain here because my opponent was just running away with primary at this point, and I didn't have enough units to sit on objectives anymore. And my thinking was also, if I had sent my captain into these Infractors over here, they would have just died. I would have just been down because, again, he's going to pop his Fight on Death for 2 CP. So I'm going to be down another unit again. I'm going to have 2 units in the next round, my Scout and my Sanguinary Guard, and I'm not going to score primary again. So let's see what happened. So as you can see, I did move into the middle. I did throw a grenade into that Infractor squad, and it didn't go very well for me. I only did 1 mortal wound. I was really hoping that I could take some of those Infractors out so that his Fight on Death would be a bit less of a problem for me, but it didn't work out so well. So as you can see at the end of the fight, the only thing that I had left was actually my captain after he popped his Fight on Death. In hindsight, I'm actually not sure if my opponent forgot that he had precision on all of his weapons, because actually I think my captain should have died first if he had precision on all of his weapons. But either way, my captain was left with 3 wounds. I scored no prisoners for 4 points and sabotage for 3. Now, one clear mistake that I think I did make here was that I didn't pop Armor of Contempt, and I instead used that CP for a grenade. If I had popped Armor of Contempt, crucially, he only had 2 CP in this round, so he could only pop his Fight on Death, and he couldn't mitigate my Armor of Contempt this time. So all of those sort of small weapons from the infractors would have gone down to 0 AP, and I would have been saving on 2s with my Sanguinary Guard. But again, if we would have played it correctly, the captain would also be dead, and I would have been not -1 to hit or -1 to wound anymore, and he did have those rerolls. So I'm not sure how much it would have changed at the end of it, but I think it was still a mistake on my part. So Emperor's Children turn 4, he pulled Display of Might, which meant he had to have more of his units than mine in No Man's Land. His kind of sticky was definitely coming in clutch there. And he also pulled Assassinate, which obviously with my jump captain sitting around in the middle there with his 3 wounds was very, very doable for him. So he did score both his secondaries in that round. So, Blood Angels turn 4. All I had left at this point was my captain and the one assault intercessor on the one side, and my scouts that were sitting on my home objective on the other. I pulled Overwhelming Force, which meant I had to kill units on objectives, and I also pulled Recover Assets. Now, for Recover Assets, I wasn't going to be pulling any actions at this point. It was time to kill. I didn't really have much of a chance of winning at this point, but I did still want to see how many points I could score. So I did kind of risk it by sending the captain and the assault intercessor into the middle to charge those tormentors. My bad. And I did also try to send my scouts into the tormentors on the right side of the picture there. I was hoping that if I kind of rolled like a Primarch or a God, I could maybe kill them. I don't know. 21 attacks, AP1. Definitely not going to happen, but hey, you got to try. And maybe, consolidate back onto the objective if I strung out my scouts a little bit. But spoiler alert, neither of my units made their charges, so that was Blood Angels turn 4. So Emperor's Children turn 5. My opponent pulled Engage on All Fronts, which meant he needed table quarters, and he also pulled Defend Stronghold. His sticky really came in clutch here again. He'd stickied his home objective. I did pop Armor of Contempt on my captain, so he surprisingly survived the shooting from the Tormentors. And I think my opponent also forgot that he had wound rerolls on my objective, my home objective there. So the scouts also survived all of his melee, but he did score both of his secondaries in this round, and then we would go into turn 5 for Blood Angels. So in Blood Angels turn 5, I pulled Overwhelming Force, which meant I had to kill units on objectives. And I also pulled Display of Might, which meant that I had to have more units than his in No Man's Land. I did score Overwhelming Force with my captain. He shot his plasma pistol into the Tormentors. He charged them. If I'm not mistaken, he did kill all of them because I scored 3 points for Overwhelming Force. And I don't think I was able to kill all his tormentors on my home objective, but at least the scouts got to fight another round. But I did score all of my secondaries in that round, so that was a nice way to wrap up my game just with another 7 victory points. So I am going to briefly go through some of the mistakes I made and what I could have done better, but just to wrap up real quick, with 81 victory points for the Emperor's Children and 49 victory points for the Blood Angels, was a resounding win for the Forces of Chaos. My opponent played a really, really good game against me, and it was a very, very difficult but also very fun list to play against. Fight on Death, fights first, +1 AP, and a very, very kind of productive CP economy from his list, plus all the precision he has in his army are very, very hard counters against Blood Angels, but it was very, very fun. There's really nothing more annoying than failing a charge against an opponent's units because they do some kind of reactive move shenanigans, or just having your army kind of wiped off the face of the earth from some sort of crazy Overwatch shooting. So, while difficult, it was a very engaging list to play against, and I look forward to playing against Emperor's Children again. So we're going to have a look at not all, but some of the mistakes I made and some of the possible turning points of this game. So let's briefly rewind to turn 1. So my opponent contends that I shouldn't have gone for the shooting here with my Land Raider into the Demon Prince, but that I should have instead moved my Land Raider over here, and I should have sent my Assault Intercessors into his Infractor squad here, and just ignored all the shooting opportunity. Now remember, if I had done that, my Land Raider would have moved to right about here. He wouldn't have gotten any shots on any of these units, and since my Assault Intercessors would have to disembark here, they also wouldn't really gotten any significant shooting onto these guys. So I would have been sending my Assault Intercessor squad into certain death into this blob here. Again, he would pop his 2 CP fight on death, 1+1 AP stratagem for 1 CP as well. I would Armor of Contempt. Maybe the captain would survive. That's what happened during the game at least. But at the end of it, he would only have his Demon Prince here to go into my Land Raider, and his Demon Prince is strength 8. So I did do the math hammer on this, and if he would have just had his Demon Prince left over, obviously he would have easily cleaved through my captain, but he wouldn't have had the killing power to take out my Land Raider anymore. So I think this was a good suggestion from my opponent. I think I should have gone into this Infractor squad. Even if I would have lost all my Assault Intercessors, it would have meant that my Land Raider would stay to fight another day, and he could have kind of kept shooting throughout the entire game. So I think that was a good piece of advice. So now let's fast forward to turn 3 for Blood Angels, and this was kind of mistake number 2. So my opponent here contends that I should have gone into the middle with my captain, my on-foot captain, to fight these tormentors together with my Sanguinary Guard. So remember, if I had done that, I would have surely lost my captain to that fight on death, since all his weapons have precision. But kind of the idea here is that maybe my captain could have taken some of the wounds, and more of my Sanguinary Guard might have survived to fight another day. I actually don't think this would have worked. And I'm going to tell you why. Because even if like maybe 3 of my Sanguinary Guard had survived, remember the captain was very likely to die from all that precision. He was guaranteed to die actually, even if I'd popped Armor of Contempt. That Lord Exultant with his AP3 ability once per game would have cleaved through my captain with all that precision. I would have had maybe 3 Sanguinary Guard squad left. And between all of the shooting that these guys have and all of the melee that the Tormentors have, I still wouldn't have been able to survive the clapback. The Tormentors have plasma guns that they can overcharge. They do have special weapons in melee. And even if my captain had survived, and my unit here would have been -1 to hit, -1 to wound in the next round, these guys would have absolutely cleaved through them anyway. They would have done something like 6.5 wounds if they'd thrown a grenade as well. Even if I'd been -1 to hit or -1 to wound, it wouldn't really have mattered. So it's never really good to say that a game is over and there's nothing you can do. But my contention is actually that at this stage in the game, with these 3 units that I have, the game actually kind of is over. Because what I realized is with his sticky, he has 1, 2, 3 units that he can engage in combat at this point. I have basically only 1 unit. I have to leave these units here on an objective. Again, you could say, well, I mean, you could move them into the center here and take this objective. But again, with the fight on death, they're going to die anyway. At the end of it, I'm going to have tops 2 units. One of them has to stay on an objective. He's going to have 2 units. Both of them are free to take objectives as they want. So I actually do think at this stage in the game, it was kind of over for me. But if you think otherwise, do feel free to tell me what you think I should have done at this stage in the game. I am very interested in trying this list again without the captains leading the Sanguinary Guard, just because I've always wanted to try it, unled Sanguinary Guard, and instead of that, maybe bring the Sanguinor in, just to have maybe 7 units in it instead of 6 to be a bit more flexible, and then also replacing the scouts maybe for some sticky to kind of just bring all the power I can. I really find that the thing that won this game, between the precision and the fight on death and what have you, at the end of it, it was pretty much the sticky, because he had 3 units that he could do whatever he wanted with them. I really only had 1 unit I could, if I'd moved these guys off their objectives, that was it for primary. So yeah, let me know what you think. And if you do like this kind of content, do consider liking and subscribing for more.